we go. All right, cool. We are recording. And I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen with you guys then as well. Let's see. It's a weird looking icon. Let's see. There we go. Oh. Okay, hang on. It's asking me for some lovely permissions here. Again, I'm not on the computer I'm normally on. This is weird. I tested this out earlier. Everything was good. You should be okay here, though. Just for whatever reason, screen sharing needs to be unlocked. Let's see here. Oh. Okay, let's see. Record the contents of your screen until it's quit. Shoot. Hey guys, I'm just getting a message here that's just saying that it's not going to be able to record my screen until I quit. So I have to click a button that's going to say quit and reopen. Just hang tight in here. I should be back in just a second where I can actually record us. It's possible if it boots you guys out, because it looks like what's wanting me to assign a guest. You just may have to click on the link again to rejoin the meeting, but give me just a second. I'll make this happen so we can see my screen and actually record at the same time. Let's see here. There we go. Well, actually, I might not have to actually quit. It seems like it's, yeah, I think it's actually working. Can you guys see my screen? Or are you still seeing me?
No, we see it.
Okay.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah, we can see it.
Cool, cool. So I didn't actually have to quit after all, which is nice. All right. Cool. On to the big show. All right, let's see here. Let me get our class up here. My goodness, this is crazy. Zoom took over my the class link. Anyway, let's see here. Got every other window open except for our class. All right. Okay. Zoom bar is right on top of everything. All right. Okay. Okay. All right, I spoke too soon. There we go. Now on to the show. All right. Thank you guys for putting up with the fumbling there. I will likely be on this computer for the next few weeks as well. So I guess we're working up the bugs there. Okay, so let's talk about the game plan for today. So I am jumping over into the D2L class, and I'm in the week 3 area here. And I want to talk a bit about the game plan for today. So really 4 things on the agenda. I want to dig into discussing the Project 1 proposals. Just very briefly with you guys, I want to get an overview of the direction that each of you guys are going to be taking. So just informally, we'll each talk for just a moment or two about like the subject and what direction you want to take the project. I want to then follow that up by talking about an introduction to CSS, which stands for Cascading Style Sheets for you guys, and talk about how that works within the realm of web design and how it very much works in conjunction with HTML. We then have 2 assignments that I want to discuss. One would be part 2 of Project 1, and then the other is going to be a Code Academy tutorial number 2. This will actually be the last Code Academy tutorial that we do for a very long time. The next series of coding tutorials that you guys are going to do are going to be coding tutorials that I actually record and then plug into our class. So normally I do, like the large majority of the coding demos I do live as we're doing our face-to-face, like we're doing, or I should say our synced online classes like we're doing now. At ECC though, these online sessions, they only last 1 hour and 45 minutes, which is just not enough time to do a good, comfortable coding demo, as well as then also doing things like critiques or talks with you guys. So I'm going to end up recording those, and then you guys can watch them and complete them really at any point during any given week. Okay. So we'll begin with the first of those next week. So again, we'll do our last Code Academy tutorial for at least the time being. There'll probably be one more that I have you guys do towards the end of the semester. But that's the basic game plan for today. So we're going to be bouncing around a little bit with things. But I would love to hear a bit from you guys about the Project One proposals. So the one thing I'll mention is that I actually received 0 questions over the week on the proposals, which can sometimes be a good thing, but it can also sometimes mean that things like went horribly wrong and like folks were scared to reach out to me. But my fears were sort of quelled this afternoon when I looked in Google Drive. It looked like the large majority of you guys had submitted those, so that's awesome. And I'm glad that it went, potentially very smooth for you guys. But without necessarily having to take the time to open each one, what I would love, because let's be honest, they don't look like much right now because we haven't learned style sheets, so we don't really know how to make them look like anything other than like default HTML. So I'll just sort of go through like my Zoom list that I have here. It doesn't necessarily look like it's alphabetical. It might be just in the order of which you guys joined. Not to worry, I'm just going to kind of go through and I'll ask you guys each to just turn your audio on for a moment. And if you could just give us a brief summary of the subject matter that you plan on using for Project One, as well as potentially the audience that you are building it for, that'd be great. And really, again, I'm only looking for you guys to potentially give me a very brief summary. You only probably have to talk for a minute or less just to give us that information. Okay? So if I'm going in the order in which I'm seeing you guys, it looks like Jose, Mr. Garcia, if you could maybe give us just a brief rundown of the subject matter and the audience for Project One for you.
Sure. I decided to do the history of the Nintendo 64.
Cool.
Yeah, the video game console, and the main audience will be like, I guess I just wrote down like gamers or video games enthusiasts, mainly like maybe people who are still interested in retro gaming.
Sure. Cool. So, Jose, I think you could make the argument that you could go with a broader audience on this because the subject itself is so very specific, right? You're not, you've got a very specific, council that you're talking about in this case. I think that you could do this one of two ways in terms of your actual audience. If you go with all gamers, and I think that even though I told you guys last week, try not to say like everybody who's interested in the subject, but when we say all gamers, there are some restrictions to that, right? We're talking about people who are potentially tech savvy, into gaming, and they're at least old enough to game. So, but with that, I would at the very minimum define some sort of a minimum age, because as I talked about last week, if you just say this is a site for everybody, if you're writing this for folks as young as, let's say, 1st or 2nd grade, the writing is going to be really, really stripped down. Even if you're writing this for like a 6th grade audience, high schoolers are going to get very bored with that, and adults are going to get very bored with that as well. So I would at least put some sort of a minimum age on it. And I do think, if you went high school and above, for example, I think that still gives you enough latitude to write to, and not have to really restrict what you're saying. But it definitely allows for folks who maybe lived through the Nintendo 64 era, who want to, be nostalgic and learn about it, as well as maybe those folks who are just into retro gaming but did not live through the era. So that would be the one, I guess, restriction that I would suggest that you add into your target audience is just maybe consider high school age and above potentially. You could maybe even say middle school, but even still, I think that you might lose some of the older audience if you go that route. So okay. Something to think about, but I think that the subject matter is fantastic. Are you going to break it down in terms like how do you think you're going to present the information? Is it you're going to break it down by category of game, or I don't know? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So far I was thinking like maybe cover like the development of the console, maybe top grossing games, most influential games, all that stuff.
Cool. Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, cool. Well, that's the Nintendo 64 is. I'm actually a little bit. I actually never gamed on the 64, but I'm definitely an NES baby and a Super NES baby. So look forward to learning a bit about the system.
Thanks.
Okay, let's see. Kribel, let's hear a bit about the direction you're taking this project.
Did you say Gurpreet?
No, Kribel. I might be mispronouncing the name. I apologize.
I actually haven't gotten to finishing it yet
Okay,
so far.
cool. Well, make sure that over the course of the next week that you do, and I would recommend just email me when you do, just so I can give you some feedback for it. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Jasmine, how about yourself?
I don't actually know if this is a good topic, but I did try to go for a topic about phones, but more specifically the negative effects phones have on children.
Okay. Cool. I mean, I do think that that could be informational in nature. So I have no background at all on that subject. I guess the best way to answer that question that you asked of whether or not it's a good topic to use is whether or not you can find ample amount of information to use to to fill up a 4-page website. Now, keeping in mind that all 4 pages, we're looking for somewhere between 3 to 5 paragraphs per page, and anywhere from 2 to 3 images per page. So, really, I guess it depends on how much research or background you have on the subject. Have you begun doing some research at all on the topic?
Hello,
Hello?
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now, but I didn't hear. I'm sorry if you answered. I didn't hear that.
Oh, I said I have not done any research yet.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I would suggest to you, Jasmine, before committing to that topic, I would just do a little bit of legwork, because I have had students in the past that picked a topic that seemed like a good one, but then they found out that there just was very little information on the topic. So, I mean, it certainly dives into the realm of psychology, and there likely is some research that was done on that, but I would say just make sure it is accessible to you. And I would definitely recommend that you do that in the next couple of days, so that you know whether or not you need to change gears, and that will still give you enough time to work on the assignment then for next week. Okay. And that's it for any of you guys. If you're just unsure about your topic, the best way to become clear on it is to do the research. I mean, obviously, if it's a topic that I'm familiar with, I could give you my opinion on it. But yeah, I guess that would probably be the immediate suggestion for you, Jasmine, is that I would do the research first, and again, if you can this afternoon and this evening, the sooner the better for sure.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Let's see. JL, how about yourself? What direction are you taking the project? It looks like JL might be connecting here. All right, I tell you what, while that connecting is happening, we'll move forward, and Jay, I'll just come back to you in just a moment. Chaz, how about yourself? What direction are you thinking about going?
All right, so I was back and forth on this, but you know what? I've always been a huge Metallica fan, so
Cool.
I thought I would kind of do a page somewhat like that, the history of the band, and
Cool.
maybe break it up in by years, this point to this point in time, and just showed how they progressed and how they became the band they are today.
Sure.
Something like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple ways you could go with that, right? I mean, being that at this point they've got a pretty deep discography, so maybe rather than breaking it down into albums, I like the idea of breaking into eras, right? Like you could do the Cliff Burton era, you could do like the Jason Newsted era, and then potentially the post Newsted era. That might be a way to, if you want to at least talk about the history of the band. Yeah, you could potentially have a discography page, although again, with it being somewhere between 3 and 5 paragraphs, maybe not necessarily. But I would say, as long as you feel that you can convey the information that you want to in a 4-page website, I think that'd be cool. Because the nice thing about that is like when I think of Metallica or really any like metal band, there's a mood and atmosphere that you can bring to the project that you just won't be able to with other genres of music or just other subjects, So it allows you to create a very like sort of moody atmospheric project potentially for your portfolio.
Gotcha.
But yeah, if I guess what I would suggest is if you feel that the band, that there's just so much information about the band that you're having a hard time whittling it down, perhaps you could, especially if you wanted to go like a musical route with it, maybe pick a band with either a smaller discography or a smaller history. That would still maybe allow you to sort of design in the same way, But yeah, something to think about. That would be my only suggestion to you.
Gotcha.
But are you thinking about doing in terms of target audience, teens and above type of a thing? Or
Yeah, I'd say teens and above. I mean, majority, it's hard to tell because it's like it's majority of the older people are what grew up with them, but then you got a lot of, teens and a lot of newer generation that are liking them, so.
Sure. Yeah.
And then listening to the old stuff too,
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think you could make a strong argument of teens and above for that. So it is it's a broader audience, but I think the unifying thing across those ages is just the love for that type of music, And again, I think they'll all respond to a very moody sort of atmospheric type of site. Okay. Cool, Chaz. Thanks for the info there. Let's see, Nick, how about yourself? What direction do you think about taking this project?
Who'd you say?
Nick, how about yourself?
all right.
What do you think about what direction do you think about taking things?
Yeah, so I was kind of thinking like, I was thinking kind of like broad scheme, but trying to keep it still specific. So I was thinking of like modern video game consoles, but I'd make sure to keep the audience to be like amateur teenagers or young adults just looking to invest into and I make sure to say modern, reliable gaming platform.
Cool.
So it kind of keeps that kind of strict set because there's like hundreds of consoles out there.
Sure.
So it'd just be like something would go on, I don't know, Google and be like, oh, I want to get into gaming. What would I need to get? And they'd stumble on like, and not that they're actually going to do it, but they'd find a website and it would just be basic information.
Okay.
But help them understand.
Sure. Yeah, and I like that approach because there are so many consoles now, and so maybe rather than talking about one or two specifically, it's just points in general to consider. And maybe weighing some of the pros and the cons between the different consoles and whatnot. I think you could pull that off. Talking about like things like tech specs and what they mean. Talking about I don't know that I necessarily have specific examples beyond that, Nick, because again, I haven't gamed in quite some time. But yeah, I like that in terms of like just modern game, like how to get into modern gaming potentially as the topic.
Yeah, for sure. And then obviously just make sure it's not persuasive, more like informational.
Sure, exactly. Okay, cool. I love it, Nick. Thanks. Kathy, how about yourself? What direction are you thinking about taking things?
Okay, well, I had two, but the one that I wrote down specifically in the proposal was Florida wild hogs. And the reason that I did it, that I'm interested in, is because I didn't even know that there were wild hogs.
Yeah.
In the U.S., let alone in Florida, all over the place.
Yeah.
So I spent some time down there, and I just wanted to learn some more information about them. But I didn't know if it was too specific to say just Florida wild hogs, or and then go from there, or if I needed to broaden it and say just wild hogs in the U.S. And I figured that my audience would be like middle, trying to keep it simple since it's informational on an animal. I thought it could be really good use if I was doing a website for the audience of like middle and high school age kids or young adults. And I figured I could cover, the history, obviously, the description, the diet, the locations, habitat, predators, information like that.
For sure.
And so
Yeah, Kathy, my thought would be I would definitely stay more regional with it, because all of those topics that you just brought up, I think, really round out a site very nicely, versus you start to include, multiple environments we might be having to deal with, like different habitats and just different information. I think the scope of it works pretty well for just picking, wild hogs in Florida. Yeah, I don't know much about them, but I do know that it's definitely a problem, and they're super intelligent animals. So it is, it's a thing. They thrive down there, and they do quite well for themselves. But in terms of the way that they interact with the habitat and humans, sometimes it's a little bit chaotic.
Yeah, they're all over the place. You really do even have to watch out for them. Until I actually saw them, I was surprised at how many there were.
Yeah. Wow. So you've seen them in person?
Yeah.
Wow. Cool. Are they fairly large animals?
They can be. Yeah, they are pretty big. I mean, I can, even when you're driving, you can pick them out easily. So they're not that small.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, it's a very unique topic, Kathy, and a very specific one. So I think that I think that you'll have a good time being able to not only find information, but it should be a fairly manageable topic, I think, to digest for this project. So yeah, nice.
That's good. Thank you.
All right, Jacob, how about yourself? What are you thinking in terms of what direction you're taking things?
So I chose a little bit of an obscure topic, but I'm doing King David I of Scotland. He reigned in the 12th century. Cool. I listened to a podcast recently about him. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Which podcast was it?
In Our Times, BBC.
Cool. Okay. Awesome. Yeah, I've got quite a long commute over to Elgin Community College, so I podcast like constantly. So I'm always looking for new stuff to digest. I'll give that a listen. Cool. Yeah, I mean, having listened to the podcast, if it's a subject that can be presented and encapsulated in within a podcast, it should be digestible also into a small, like 4-page website. And obviously there should be no shortage of information. When it comes to the imagery, that might be something you have to be willing to kind of work with, or maybe in some cases create some of the graphics, because obviously there's no photography from back then. But obviously at the same time, I think a quick Google image search should give you a good idea of whether or not there's enough imagery that you can pull from the internet. Otherwise, if you're a little bit comfortable with Illustrator or Photoshop, you should be able to create things if needed as well.
Yeah, I did do a Google search just on him, and there are a few images.
Great.
Not images, but like mosaics or stained glass things of him.
Perfect.
And then also I thought I would include scenery of the area that he ruled. He was known for as being a city builder, or he established a couple of boroughs. Cool. So I can include pictures of those, as well as he was big on bringing monks from other countries in. So I can include pictures of that.
Cool. All right. Yeah, absolutely. All right. I'm glad to hear that you did a little legwork and got an idea of whether or not it was a good subject. Cool. Perfect, Jacob. All right. Catherine, how about you? What subject have you chosen?
Okay. I chose the red panda. And it'll just pretty much talk about like their habitat and their endangered species and things like that. Basic information about the animal. I think my audience will be like middle school and high school, to possibly like parents helping their children in doing homework or something.
Okay, cool. So consider maybe tightening that audience up a bit. I think any one of the 3 that you kind of define there could make for a wonderful site. I mean, like, this, if it were something for parents that were helping children learn, you probably have, at that point, you kind of have a dual audience, right? Like, the main audience being younger kids that are learning, and then maybe their parents are reading some of the type, but we can use a color palette that is definitely much more geared towards younger kids. And then you also mentioned it could be potentially for middle school or high school. I do think in the educational realm, especially when you're talking about like an animal or historical subject, I think we want to get very specific, because textbooks for middle school are definitely, different than like textbooks for high school. So I would pick one of those three, either grade school, middle school, high school, because it'll just allow you to design not only the design of the site very streamlined to who you're speaking to, but also the actual the text and the information. That would really be my only suggestion, but I think otherwise I think the topic's great.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, let's see. Jennifer, how about yourself?
Okay, sorry about that.
Nope, no worries.
All right, so I picked a women's art workshop. They have been doing this since 2014. They do it once a month, except for when COVID was around. And it's a spiritual art workshop. They read a book, they research it, they pick certain chapters, they present it, and then they have a full entire area that has many different mediums. And the women that come to see them, they can make any art project that they pick out to do that associates with the topic.
Cool.
So they could paint, they even like headdresses one time, like it
Wow,
was really
awesome.
cool. They've got, they got everything. You can make a collage, you can make an art board, an art journal. I mean, so what I want to do is kind of educate people more about what they do, like their past sessions and their sessions coming up, because they really do a lot of research on it, and they have a lot of resources.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what it is. It's for women, usually 20 to 60 or 20 and up.
Okay.
They
Cool.
do cater a lunch, and it's actually a really fancy lunch. I like the food from the lady, but I don't know. That's where I was kind of going with that. If that's
No, I think that's fantastic. Even though you have a big age range there, I think that we're not talking about all women from 20 to 60. We're talking about like very creative and potentially spiritual women, right? So
Yeah.
those are qualifiers that certainly narrow the audience down. So yeah, I think that's great. You can obviously get very creative in terms of the design when you're dealing with a creative audience. So that's awesome as well. And yeah, you sort of answered or relieved my only, not necessarily fear, but the one thing I was going to say is be sure that this isn't really a promotional website for them, but more an informational one. And you definitely, about halfway through as you were talking, you said, this is definitely going to be like a website that's more about them, not necessarily, I mean, obviously, in talking about them, you're going to pique some people's interests. So from that standpoint, it may bring people to them, but it's not necessarily a website where you're doing straight up promotions with like, a form that people can enter information and get like a coupon or something like that. It's much more about just presenting what it is.
right.
Yeah, love it.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Yep.
Oh, I'll turn myself off.
Yeah, thanks.
Trying to find it. Sorry.
There we go. All right, Kyle, how about yourself? What direction are you taking this project? Looks like Kyle might have stepped away for a moment. Let's bounce forward here. Jim,
Me.
yeah, I did. It's no worries, Kyle. No worries. Yeah, what direction do you think about going with this project?
I was thinking of maybe doing a website on Major League Baseball parks.
Cool. So my suggestion here, Kyle. So I'm a huge baseball fan. Baseball is like my first love in the world. So my question, I guess, because you may have thought through this. Initially, when I hear that, I think, okay, boy, we got to, like there's 32 stadiums, as well as like all the historical stadiums, like that's a lot. That's a big subject to cover in like 4 pages. What are your strategies in terms of condensing that information down to like a 4-page website?
I decided to just focus on stadiums that are still in use today.
Okay.
And I'm going to be focusing on only certain elements of the parks, such as like distances from home plate to, walls in the outfield or something like that, or unique quirks that ballparks have, or seating capacities, or stuff like that.
Cool.
Only a
I
few
love
of
that.
those.
I love that. That's a wonderful way to go about it, because that baseball is just obviously a very unique sport, and that every stadium is different. They don't necessarily play by standards, right? I mean, we've got the standards of the bases. That's it. Otherwise, it's
Right.
so yeah, that's awesome. So potentially then this website might not. There will potentially be some parks that maybe aren't even talked about, which would be okay. I do think, again, that's going to be your biggest challenge with this project, is trying to narrow that down. In terms of an age range, what are you thinking about for your audience? Or maybe
I was
beyond age as well.
I was thinking of generally around, grade school children to young adults. So like maybe ages 10 through 20, maybe around there.
But maybe, I mean, I would maybe divide that by half, to be honest with you. Because again, like writing for a 10-year-old would become, that sort of writing style would be very, very boring for like an 18.
Yes. Right.
Again, I think for all of you guys, there's a really wonderful opportunity. Like, don't necessarily. I usually get 1 or 2 projects a semester where the students will go for a very young audience, and I will tell you that oftentimes those are the coolest sites, because just if you think about it, like a lot of the projects that you guys work on as students are usually geared for more of an adult audience. So it's kind of a cool challenge to think about things in terms of a younger audience. And I'm not saying by any means, Kyle, that you've got to go that route.
Right.
Certainly go older. But again, I would maybe say instead of like 10 to 20, maybe consider like 14 to 20.
Yes.
Or like 10 to 14 kind of a thing. Because then again, you don't necessarily have to like dole down the information for the older audience to reach the younger audience.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, just when I think of like historically, when I think of baseball, there's so many directions that you could go at the design of this, which is awesome. Like I would kill as a designer to like work in a baseball themed project. That'd be awesome. Okay, cool. Have fun with this, Kyle. And I really look forward to hearing about some of the unique quirks of the stadiums for sure.
All right.
Let's see. Jalen, how about yourself? Which direction are you taking things?
So kind of what I did was explaining the gospel. So I'm a Christian, so I would take it based off of a book that I read and kind of break it up into 4 parts and have each of the sub pages kind of go in depth on each part.
Okay.
The gospel. And then in terms of audience, I'm gearing more to young adults, so probably people in their 20s.
Cool.
So the idea is to make it clear, but also like able to like expand on it. So kind of like a general idea, and then taking each point and kind of explaining each.
Okay. Cool. And you think you can fit it all within like the 4 pages, because you mentioned that you feel like you can fit it into like 4 categories.
Yeah. So the idea would be taking the essential idea of the gospel. So not explaining the whole like history of Christianity, just like what the Bible's about. And then each point having a main idea, and then taking each main idea and breaking it down. Okay.
Awesome. Cool. Well, yeah, I mean, I definitely look forward to seeing how you break all these things down. Because obviously there's many more than just like 4 books. Like for example, that's the first thing that kind of like that comes to my mind. It's like, wow, this is a big topic. But hearing you talk about that, it sounds like you're confident about the way that you're going to approach it. So I will, just look forward to seeing how you break this down.
All right, thank you.
Carlos, how about yourself?
You hear me?
Yep, I can.
So I'm thinking to do ocean life,
Okay.
and then have 3 separate layers or levels of the ocean life. and probably like geared to like middle schoolers,
Cool.
young kids. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Cool. What what do you think the three categories of Ocean Life will be?
Well, it's gonna be like the three different like sea levels.
Ah, okay. So
Yeah.
like literally the depths.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay, awesome. Yeah, I think that obviously very, very visual with that then. There should be no shortage of imagery and photos.
Yeah.
But yeah, and with the younger audience, yeah, obviously this could be a very colorful website as well. Okay, cool, very good.
Thank you.
All right, let's see. Luis, how about yourself? What are you thinking? What direction you're going to go?
I think I'm probably gonna be doing like history, like the history of racing simulators, basically.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah, because there's a pretty big history with that going like, from like basic, 8-bit video games to like, the modern giants and like everything's like hyper realistic and all that stuff.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, and you could probably break it down by era, in terms of the beginnings and the progression all the way to modern day.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So that might even be a topic where if you can find some videos on YouTube that maybe demonstrate some of these things, I can easily show you how to embed those into the HTML. That's something, guys, that usually I don't do until the final project, but for any of you that maybe want to do that for this particular site, it's easy enough to do. And I just feel like, Louise, for yourself, it'd be so much more dynamic to show videos of the simulators rather than just still images. I mean, you certainly can still include images, don't get me wrong. But yeah, I feel like if we can actually experience it through video, it'll be far more dynamic.
Yeah. I probably might do videos, or I'm still seeing how I'm gonna work things out still.
Okay.
But probably videos would be a good idea.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Yeah, very unique topic for sure. All right, let's see. We've got a few more left here. Bella, how about yourself?
Hello?
Hey, Bella, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Sorry, I just.
No, it's okay. It's all good.
Yeah, these headphones are weird, so sometimes they don't work. Anyways, so for my topic, I wanted to talk about Sanrio characters. So I was planning to make like little biographies of a few of the popular characters like Hello Kitty and My Melody and stuff.
Cool.
And I wanted to make the website really like fun and cute and simple. So I feel like my audience would be like younger kids, like grade school kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you target that age range, like I've mentioned to a few students already, I mean, you can have a ton of fun creating a really rich mood and atmosphere that's just colorful and fun. And it doesn't necessarily have to have a ton of information. It can lean much more on the visual side of things rather than like, an overload of type.
Right.
Okay. Cool. Thanks, Bella. Gurpreet, how about yourself? Which direction are you taking the project?
Hi, actually, I wanna make a website on beauty tips, like for beauty beginners. So how we can use beauty product for homepage. I wanna put all the product like prime, whatever in the beauty most of female use. And on the second page, I want to launch my product, like which one product is good. And third page, I wanna use for skin treatment.
Okay.
Fourth page, I wanna use for a member or how they can contact us.
Okay, so that's one page that I would not necessarily consider including in this project. In this project, we won't be talking about contact forms. Now, on the final project, we will. So you will get that knowledge eventually, and certainly in the future, maybe in portfolio, if you wanted to modify this site, you could. But that's we're many weeks away from learning how to do like contact forms. So that page I would recommend considering altering. But the other ones sound good to me. I think you'll be okay with those.
Okay, I will change it.
Cool.
Okay.
All right. And let's see. And Ruth, let's hear what direction you're going to take the project.
I was thinking maybe like talk about how video games were made for the website.
Okay.
It could just anybody who wants to like make video games. So yeah.
Okay, so maybe like from a standpoint of like video game development potentially.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Awesome. Yeah, because at first I'm sort of thinking more, in terms of like the early history of like how video games are made. But yeah, that would be fantastic. So this could potentially be a very practical thing where maybe you have some, maybe some very, very small rudimentary like coding demos or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Cool. That's actually something I've never had a student do in this class. Like there's obviously like there's the approach of like doing like a educational type of a thing, like history of the web, or in this case, gaming. I like that a lot. I think there's potential to build something very practical, because I mean, there's a ton of sites out there that do that. You can kind of lean on and look at for that information. Okay. Cool, guys, thank you much for taking us through that. That certainly helps me kind of wrap my head around things. We have a really, really diverse set of subjects that we're talking about, which generally leads to a lot of dramatically different and diverse designs as well. So that's really cool. I'm looking forward to seeing where things are going to go with this over the next few weeks. Cool. So I would say before we transition into a new subject today, why don't we kind of stick on the topic of the website that we're working on right now, Project One, the one you just did the proposal for, and talk a little bit about the next step in that process. So here, I'm going to kind of condense my Zoom window for a moment here. Here we go. And we'll talk a bit about part two. So part two is where we begin to do some design for this. Normally in the process of web design for a larger site, after you do your proposal, I would have you guys build what's called a flow chart, and then potentially even start working on what are called wireframes. We'll do those for the final project. Those are really, though, unnecessary for such a small, like micro site like we're making right now. It's a 4-page website. So a flow chart really isn't necessary. And if you're not really sure what a flow chart is, don't even worry right now. If you are familiar with it, I think you get the idea that like it would just be a unnecessary task. I also feel like having you guys do wireframes on such an early site is unnecessary as well, because we'll all be building a 1-column website. That also might be terminology that you're not familiar with right now. Again, no worries. I'll show you guys some examples of some past student projects right now, so you can kind of get an idea of what like a 1-column website actually means. But again, wireframes aren't really necessarily like needed for such a rudimentary basic site. So we'll begin like step 2 by immediately diving into the design of just the banners. That would be like the head banners of each of these pages for your project. So I'll show you guys some examples of that in just a moment, but let's take a look at the assignment sheet itself. So remember that for each step, each part of this project, I'll have a very specific assignment sheet. If you want to go back and look at the entire project spec sheet, remember that's always going to be here in week 2, where we've got like the spec sheet for the entire project and outlines what we're doing each and every week. But then again, like last week and this week, each week I'll give you an individual part to focus on then as well. So this part again is the banner designs. This is one of the simpler assignment sheets in the project, and that there is really, there's not much to it in terms of the assignment itself. And again, I will show you guys some visual examples of what this looks like here in just a moment, okay, in case this isn't quite making sense. But you're going to make a banner design for each of the 4 pages of your educational website. The banners should be 960 pixels wide, okay? So in Photoshop or Illustrator, you can use either one of those programs, whatever you're more comfortable with. You're going to start off with a canvas that's 960 pixels wide. And I have to point this out because a lot of students that are taking this class are graphic designers who are used to working in inches. For all of the graphics we make this semester, we're going to be working in pixels. Pixels because we're designing for a screen. Our websites will never be printed. They're not for a magazine. They're not, that's not the output. The final output for these is a screen, whether it's a computer screen or a mobile device. So we always will be working in pixels. So 960 pixels wide. The height of the banners is your choice. I'm going to give you some common heights to choose between. I'm going to recommend either 320, 360, or 400 pixels in height. And then in terms of the specs as well, you should be working in 72 DPI and RGB color. So just as a quick example, if I were setting this up, I'll show you the difference in the canvas sizes here real quick. Okay, so if I were making a brand new file, again, I'd be asking you guys to be working at a width of 960 and making sure that that's in pixels. And then the height really is up to you based on those three numbers. We'll do one that's 320. That'll be a fairly short banner. Also, we want to make sure our resolution is 72 and that our color mode is RGB. Again, for graphic designers, this is probably not customary for you. You're used to working in 300 DPI. We definitely do not want to work in 300 DPI for the web because smaller file sizes is what we are interested in. Monitors, really, and it depends on the monitor, but most monitors will display at 72 DPI. And anything really above and beyond that is just extra file size. And make no doubt about it, like a 300 DPI document, sounds like it's 3 times larger, right? Like if we use the customary resolution numbers, we go from 72 to 150, 150 to 300. So it seems like 2 jumps, but there's actually, for every 1 pixel at 72 DPI, there's 9 pixels in a 300 DPI document, meaning that if you work at 300 DPI, your file sizes of your graphics are going to be 9 times larger than they need to be. Okay, so it's very important that we follow those numbers that I have in the assignment sheet. So this is what a 960 by 320 banner will look like. It is a relatively short one. There were a couple other sizes in there. I said 960 by 360. That looks like the same to me. Nope. So a little bit taller. And the third option, if you want to do like a really big sort of bold hero banner, you can go 960 by 480. That will give you a much taller size. Any of those are fine. You'll see some examples here in just a moment of what those look like. You can create those banners in Illustrator, Photoshop, or I mean, if you're using free software like Photopea would be a decent one, but I do strongly recommend Illustrator or Photoshop for these. Banner designs should have a unifying theme that look and tie the website together, okay? So they should look cohesive. And again, I'm going to show you examples of what I'm talking about here. We don't want them to look like 4 radically different banner designs. They should have there should be things that unify them. In the examples, you'll see that the type is consistent, or in some cases, the type of imagery is consistent. These banners will be submitted just in their Photoshop or AI file formats, and they'll be submitted to the Project One Banner Designs shared folder on our Google Drive. These will be due at the beginning of class next week, and we'll do a full class critique on this. So each of you will we'll show those, and I will give you guys some feedback on them. Let me show you real quick some examples of this project over the last 2-3 semesters, so you can get an idea of what these banners look like and what the purpose of them is. So I'm gonna go back here. Okay, so this student, Robin, she made a fun informational site on making coffee without a coffee maker. That was her subject. This is her banner on her homepage, and this is an example of what you'll be creating for next week. Just the banner. It's not going to be coded. It's not going to be saved for the web yet. We'll do a demo on that. You're just designing the 4 banners for your website. So this is one of her banners. There is a page on Turkish coffee. You can see here that this is her banner for that page. Baguette coffee, that's her banner for this page. And in the case of Cowboy Coffee, this is her banner for this page. Okay. So again, they feel very cohesive. She's using the same font. It looks like it's Impact for each of these. She's got a same placement for those. She's got nice high quality images on all these pages. The only page that does not have the type in the bottom corner is the coffee without a coffee maker like logo that she made here, but that actually does appear on all the sub pages up in the top corner. But this would be a good example of 4 very cohesive, very clean, very professional looking banners, where it's essentially, in this case, just images with some type laid on top of it. Okay. Let me show you a few more examples, and then I'm going to open this up for questions. Let's see. So Alexandria. So her banner is up top here. Kind of my Zoom thing is in the way of the links, and move this. There we go. Okay, so this is the banner area. And again, you can see there's a nice cohesive look and feel to these, right? She's got, while there are different images, the placement of the type, as well as like this sort of semi-transparent horizontal bar, very much ties these together. Her homepage banner is obviously much larger. That's okay. I mean, if you wanted to do a nice big sort of huge hero banner for your homepage, I would certainly be fine with that. Let's see here. Jennifer, she did her subject on aliens. And again, this actually was done in Illustrator. So she illustrated like the, celestial things there. But again, you'll notice that there's a nice consistency here to these pages. So sightings, aliens, probability. So again, same typeface, same for the headers. And in this case, she's got some subheaders here as well. And she's basically recycling some of these elements between the pages. Let's see, I've got one more example that I will show you. Let's see, Rosanna did this one, I believe, if I remember correctly, this was for dogs or rescue dogs. So yeah, take a look at how wonderful and consistent this one is then. So, she's basically just, again, like same font and header, subheader, but she found different images of dogs for these pages, and it comes together very, very well. Okay. So this is what I'm talking about designing when we're looking at this assignment, and I'm asking you to do page banner designs. So designing one banner to the top of each of your pages, just following these specs right here. Okay. And again, just save them as PSD or AI files. If you prefer, you can work all in one Photoshop or Illustrator file by just working on, like in Photoshop, you can go ahead and create like, layer groups or layer folders for yourself. You can put a banner in each group if you want, or in Illustrator if you want. You can certainly work with layers in Illustrator as well. And you can have, let's see, you can have each banner on its own layer if you want, and just turn those on and off to show them. Or if you feel comfortable just working in 4 separate files, that's fine as well. I tend to find, though, it's a little bit easier if you're working all in one to have them look and feel more consistent. Any questions on this?
So when you were clicking, going between the pages, the wording that was below, is that part of the banner, or is that something that's added after?
Great question. That is separate. So that is done in the actual HTML and then controlled with style sheets. So that, do not design that part right now. That will do in code. Yeah, thanks for asking that one. That's a good one.
Okay.
I had a question.
Sure.
I forgot if it's true or not, but do ECC students get Photoshop for free?
Yes. So yeah, you get Photoshop and Illustrator for free. So Nick, quick suggestions for you if you don't have that running on your computer right now, because I've had a couple of students on campus that weren't quite sure what to do. So you likely got the email from ECC, or actually I think it comes directly from Adobe actually. So you should have got the email from Adobe probably way back in the spring. Most of my students go back in their email and they can't find it because they don't go back far enough to look. So a couple of my students who had some issues with this, they got their email from Adobe way back in May. like when they signed up for the classes for the semester. But my recommendation to you guys is find that email and install the apps on your computer from that. The email will just have like a big blue button that's going to say get started. And you click on that, takes you to Adobe site, and it's a very seamless process. It is not that easy to do directly by going to the Adobe site yourself without that invite, okay? I can speak to that from personal experience as well. Last semester when I started working at UCC, I had a very difficult time going through Adobe. And it wasn't until I went through the actual email from Adobe from my ECC mail and then it was easy, no problem to do that. But yes, that would be my suggestion to you. If you haven't installed that software yet, please go through the email that you were sent. If you do look in your inbox and you can't find it, you'll have to email. Actually, you can email me, and I'll put you in touch with our program director, Juan. Okay? But yeah, that's my tips for making that process as smooth as possible.
All right, yeah, thanks. I found the email.
Awesome, good. So yeah, if you follow that, Nick, you'll be golden.
All right, sounds good. Thanks again.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Any other questions, folks? Cool. Yeah, I mean, hopefully it's a fairly straightforward, task that you guys have in front of you there. All right, cool. So let's, maybe what we'll do here is we'll take just a quick break. I want to try and, at about the 50-minute mark or so, try and just do a very, very short break for each of these classes, but not too long of one. Again, we don't really have that much time together. When we get back from like a quick 5-minute break, what we'll do is, hang on, let's condense this again. We will jump back into the week 3 area. There's 2 more things that I want to talk about with you guys. I want to talk about, I want to do a lecture for you guys on the basics or sort of an introduction to what CSS is. And then I want to talk about the assignment. The assignment here actually, this is going to be sort of misleading. I'll fix this. The homework actually is going to be, again, like I mentioned earlier, just another Code Academy tutorial. So there's actually 2 bits of homework, right? We've got the coding demo, and we've got the tutorial, and then we've got the banner design. So that's what you'll be working on between this week and next week. But yeah, when we get back from the break, we'll talk about CSS specifically, and I can show you guys some nice examples of like what that actually does. So cool. I'm going to take a moment then. Here, let me jump back into Zoom for a moment. I'm going to, while we're taking the break, I'm just going to stop the share. But again, we'll return here, let's say at about 2:05, just a quick 5-minute break. All right, guys, let's jump back into round two. Let's see, you guys are still seeing my my screen, correct? My desktop?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
No, we can't see your desktop.
No, okay.
Sorry.
Can you see the D2L class?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. All right, let's transition over into talking about CSS. So the lecture that I'm going to be doing today, the visuals for it are inside of week 3. You're welcome to download them for yourself, but otherwise, if you just want to kind of kick back and watch through here, that will absolutely work as well. So within the lecture today, we're going to talk about like what CSS is and ultimately like why we have CSS. And then I would love to introduce some CSS syntax as well. The question I have for you guys though, before I do this, do any of you guys know like what the difference or what the roles of like, yep.
Sorry, Peter, but I don't see your screen. Am I the only one that's not seeing it?
Yeah,
I just,
Yeah, I'm not screen either.
no? Okay, let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and try and share my screen again here. Let's see. Okay, cool. Is that working for you guys now?
No, yeah.
Yeah, we're
Yes,
good now.
I can see it now. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for letting me know. I appreciate it. So yeah, the question I have for you guys is, do any of you know like what the difference really between like HTML and CSS are, or maybe a better way to ask it is like what the roles of these things are? Any of you guys at all?
I think this one we use for color when we put color in HTML.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly one of the things that does group read. Absolutely. We can certainly like add things like color with CSS for sure.
It's also used to format text and do different fonts and arrange things.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the aesthetics part of the website.
Yes, yes, Catherine, that's in terms of big picture, that's a wonderful way to explain it right there. Really, if you think about like a website, I mean, I'm speaking very simplistically here, but if a website can always be broken down into really 2 things. I mean, you could argue that depending on the website, you could have a third with JavaScript, but from a basic, simple website standpoint, websites are controlled by 2 things, or they consist of 2 things, HTML and CSS. And to kind of piggyback on what Catherine said there, you can think of HTML as the stuff, the content, okay? Like when you guys put together your proposal for the project in HTML last week, it was simply the text, the stuff, like the actual copy that you wanted somebody to see. It didn't look like much though, right? Like it looks like basic default HTML, or what I would call unstyled HTML, which is all the backgrounds are white, the text is black, it's Times Roman, it's very basic, okay? CSS is essentially instructions for that HTML, or think of it in terms of the content, instructions for how your content should look, okay? Websites are always broken up into those 2 segments. This wasn't always the case. If you go back to the late 90s when I learned how to work for websites, we didn't have CSS. And it was a very big problem because if we wanted to make a change to something like Gurpreet said, like a color, or like something like Jacob said, like the font, if we had a 300-page website, we'd have to open up 300 web pages and find every single instance of code that controlled the font or the color and change like, potentially 300 pages worth of code. It was a nightmare. What CSS does for us is it not only controls the way that a website looks, but it does so in one location. A cascading style sheet is one single document that gives all of a website, whether it's 3 pages, 300, or 3,000 pages, It gives the instructions on how to look. So if you decide one day, or your client decides one day that maybe they want, all of the headers across 3,000 pages to be a different font or a different color, all you have to do is go to one document, change the one bit of code that controls your headers, and the entire website is then updated. That's sort of like the why, at least, behind it. But before I continue to keep rambling about visuals, I'll pull up the lecture because it kind of goes through this stuff. But that's sort of where we're going with this, and ultimately kind of like big picture in terms of like what it actually does. Let me condense this view real quick. Cool. All right, so I'm going to jump back into the lecture here then. All right, so let's see. All right, so what is CSS? Let's start with that. Cascading Style Sheets is an acronym, or CSS is an acronym for Cascading Style Sheets. And it's a coding language that is intended to simplify the process of making web pages more presentable. And that term, presentable, is another very commonly used term, guys, when it comes to explaining CSS. Think of HTML as, again, the content. Think of CSS as the way that that content is presented or how it looks. Okay? Because of the way it's controlling the way that things look, it's a very designer-friendly language. You'll find when we start working with it that right away, even though there's going to be lines of code you've never seen before, you're going to be able to look at them as a designer and go, oh, that actually makes a lot of sense. I totally understand like what that's doing. But CSS allows you to apply styles to HTML web pages. More importantly, CSS enables you to do this independently of the HTML that makes up each web page. And that kind of gets back to what I was talking about earlier. A CSS document is independent from the HTML documents. It controls the way they look, but it's done all in one document. And it controls up the way that all of your HTML pages in a website look. And that's where its real power sort of lies. Okay. CSS describes how HTML elements are to be displayed on various screens. CSS saves a ton of work, as I sort of alluded to a moment ago, right? It can control the layout of multiple web pages all in one. In fact, if you've worked, for any of you who have worked with InDesign on a more advanced level, you've probably already worked with styles. Now, it's the same concept, it's the same idea, okay? Optimally, CSS is linked externally to HTML files, and external style sheets are all stored in a single CSS file with the .css extension. And this is sort of a little preview of like what styles look like. We'll talk about this more extensively later. But like, for example, you guys learned in the Code Academy about like header tags, for example. So this would be an example of what a style sheet would look like, where it would, anything that's an H1 has a particular font, for example, a particular font size, a color, and even, you can even set up borders. We'll talk about all this stuff, but this would basically be, large 20-point text, which is blue and the font of Courier, and it would have an underline underneath it, okay? So, again, even though you may have never seen this stuff before, looking at it, it's very intuitive for designers, okay? Another example would be this paragraph here. Anything in a paragraph tag would be Arial, 12-point, and a specific color. Okay, we'll talk about what this kind of color versus this color actually means. This is actually called a hexadecimal color code. I'll talk very specifically about that as we move forward. But you can also just call it to colors in terms of just calling out like red, for example. Okay. All right, some of this I've already talked about, so I can kind of glaze through it. But again, why use CSS? There's really 3 reasons. Number 1, you can write CSS all in one place and reuse that style sheet across multiple HTML pages. Also easy maintenance. To make a global change, simply change the style in one document and all of the elements in the web page will be updated automatically. And then you've got much more superior styles to HTML. When we used to style inside of our HTML, it was very, very limited in terms of the things we could do. CSS has hundreds and hundreds of additional design attributes that you can control compared to just HTML. So it can give you a far better looking HTML page in comparison to just using HTML attributes versus CSS. So it's just a win-win all around. Okay. So let's talk about CSS syntax. There really are two parts of any CSS. So CSS comprises of style rules that are interpreted by a browser. Remember, browser being the thing that we're viewing websites in, right? Like Firefox or Chrome or Safari. And then these styles are applied to the corresponding elements of your document. A style rule, or simply put, just a style, that's what most designers and developers just refer to them as, is just styles, consist of a selector and a declaration block. These are fancy terms, I'll explain what they mean. The selector, just quite simply, is the thing you're talking to in the HTML. H1, for example, is an HTML tag. H1, H2, all of those paragraph tags. You've got all sorts of different tags. That's what we're talking to. The declaration is how we want this to look. Okay? So if we actually coded this in a style sheet, any HTML page that was connected to that style sheet, anytime we had H1 text, it would be blue and it would have a font size of 12, for example. Okay, that is essentially it in terms of the syntax. Any individual attributes that we have here are separated by a semicolon. So when you see a semicolon, that means that we're now moving on to a new thing. You'll see when we actually start typing it in CSS together, I actually prefer for every single set of attributes to put them on another line so that they stack up easily on top of each other. And it just makes for a very, very visual thing, kind of like this, for example. Like I like to have mine on top rather than just one long like line run on. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, so again, with CSS syntax, again, talking about like the selector and the declaration. So the selector points to the HTML element you want to style. The declaration block contains one or more declarations separated by semicolons, as I mentioned, and each declaration includes a CSS property name and a value. Okay, so this would be the property, this would be the value. In CSS, they are separated by a colon. Okay. That will always be the case. And again, every line of properties and values is ended by a semicolon there. Okay. So for example, the color property up here, color is the property, blue is the value, font size is a property, and 12 is its value. Okay. And again, a CSS declaration always ends in a semicolon. Declaration blocks are always surrounded by these curly brackets. Okay. So different selectors can have many declarations. It's not uncommon for you to have, half a dozen or even as many as a dozen different declarations that are controlling something. Okay. CSS selectors are used to find or select HTML elements based on their element. So we can call out to elements in HTML based on their name. So that would be an example of that would be like the H1 tag. We can also call out to things based on IDs and classes. Today, I'm not really going to dig into them too deeply, but next week when I record my a screen demo for you guys, we'll dig into them because that's when things like the power of CSS really opens up dramatically. Okay. Also, we have the ability of creating what's called a universal selector. So rather than calling out to an element's like a specific element, a very common thing of doing is using, shoot, can I go back? Let's see here. Let me exit out of here and go backwards there. There we go. So a universal selector like this. An example of this would be like if we put this in a style sheet, everything would be have a color of all these zeros. All these zeros are black. So what we would use a universal selector to do, I'll teach you guys how to do what's called a CSS reset, because different browsers will interpret some layout elements a little bit differently. We tend to use universal selectors to zero them out so that all browsers now start off with like zeros essentially for positioning and for padding and margins and stuff. That may not make any sense right now. No worries. I will show you guys how to do that. Okay. All right, let's see here. Okay. And yeah, again, here's just another example. So again, the selectors in this case would be the paragraph tag. Okay. And the element selector adds elements based on the element name. So you can select all paragraph elements on a page like this. So any paragraph that displays inside of an HTML document would be controlled by this chunk of text right here. In which case, if we were using this specific example, all paragraphs would be center aligned, and then all paragraphs would contain red type. Okay. Okay. All right. All right. So again, with selectors, there are ways that we can add names to our tags that we can control. And again, I would rather almost show and talk about this next week when we're doing it in the demo. I think if I'm talking abstractly about it, it's just not going to make a whole lot of sense right now. Okay. I think that's actually our last page then too. Yeah. So I'll show you some examples, specific examples of classes next week. Okay. But ultimately, a lot of what I just talked about may not make a lot of sense until you start coding. But this PDF has these examples in there for a reason, so that you can copy and paste them. You can literally copy and paste this into some code and start modifying. But it contains this contains within the syntax area the rules of how CSS works, and that's the important part of this. That's why this presentation actually ends up being pretty valuable, because you can reference it later if you get stuck on something, and it will tell you exactly like how the syntax should actually look. Okay. So until we actually start doing this and hand coding these things, you may not necessarily have any questions. But just in case, I don't know, do any of you have any questions based on what I just discussed? Yeah, and if you don't, that's a-okay, no worries. You know, moving forward, as you start to actually start coding these things, you know, there'll be questions, and that's a-okay. All right, cool. So there's really only one other order of business to take care of then in our class then today. Let's see, let's get back to, what the heck? I don't know why I keep losing my classroom. Is it down here? No. All right, nuts. Shoot. Yeah, it would seem, oh, you know what, because I closed the presentation. Hello. All right, hang tight, guys. Let's take just a second. I'll get right back in there. All right, so one more time, I'm back in the content area, jumping into week 3 here. All right, cool. So yeah, the only other order of business in here that we really need to worry about would be the Code Academy tutorials. If you click on this, it's pretty straightforward, very much like you did last week. Yep, that's the banner designs. Let's see. Yeah, it's just a matter of completing the Code Academy basic CSS. Okay. Cool. So that will open you up on Code Academy directly on the CSS page. This will be very, very similar in nature to when you guys completed the HTML from last week. Okay. So you'll go through those, take a screenshot, and submit that screenshot to me to the Google Drive. Okay. Yep, there we go. So, you know, if you actually click on that, it will expand and show you. It's again, there's the link. Same thing that we did last week, essentially. So for this week, we'll be completing a series of short coding tutorials, learning CSS. Use the direct link above, or you can actually just search for learn CSS. Complete the lessons, take a screenshot, and submit them to the Google Drive in HTML CSS assignment 2. There it is right there. Okay. All right. Cool. Any questions on that at all? No? All right. Awesome. Well, really, guys, in terms of our meeting for today, that's really all I had to go through with you guys. As always, when I stop the recording, it'll take about 20 minutes or so for the video to process. It takes about another 20 minutes or so for me to get it actually plugged into YouTube. But just like the previous, just like the previous recordings, I will place a link inside the Zoom class recordings area here. But again, it won't happen immediately, not until those things are processed. Okay. Cool.
I want to know, like, we have to make 4 banner or only 1 banner?
I'm sorry, Grouper, can you repeat that one more time? The audio kind of broke.
Actually, I want to know, like, we have to make a 4 banner or only 1 banner?
Oh, you're going to make 4 banners, 1 for each page. Yeah, let's take a look real quick at the assignment for that.
Okay. And we have to also submit anywhere or just keep it?
So here, so for the banners, so again, you're going to create a banner for each of your 4 pages. That's a total of 4 banners that you're going to create. And again, the height and width of those is listed here, as well as the DPI and the RGB color. So yes, I'm looking for 4 banners total. You can do them, if you'd like, you can do them in 1 Photoshop or 1 Illustrator file, like I talked about.
Okay.
But 4 designs, yeah. So that you guys are responsible for that for next week, as well as the Code Academy tutorials.
Okay, and where we have to submit this one? Okay, I found it.
Did you find it? Okay, cool. I was gonna say we've got the so there's the Code Academy, the Project One informational website. You'll submit the part 2 right into the banner designs. And actually, I don't want this to mislead. I don't want those to be JPEG or GIFs like it says in the assignment sheet. I want those to be AI or PSD files. We haven't talked about properly saving images for the web yet, but we will. Okay. So eventually, before we plug them into your actual website, they will be converted. But so for this one, no RIP folder at all. You're just submitting either Illustrator or Photoshop files to me for this.
Okay.
Good question.
And should we save the banners under assignments or resources or?
Oh, in your RIP folder, the banners at this point, Jacob, won't go in your RIP folder. And they'll go in there once we save them specifically for the web. But for this part, in your RIP folder, we will not put any Illustrator or Photoshop files at all over the course of the whole semester, okay?
Okay.
I'll probably be doing this in Illustrator for the banners.
Yeah.
Since we're not zipping it or packaging the file, do you want me to outline the fonts?
Yes, please. Yeah. Yeah, Chaz, that's an excellent question. So yes, for any of you who are doing this in Illustrator, if you don't outline the fonts, they will not show up when you show them to me next week or when I pull them up, okay? So if you're using Illustrator, just a really quick reminder on how to do that. I'll just do this on another layer real quick. So if I were to type in, you know, something, let's make an example here. So if I'm using a font in here, I am going to want to just control click, or if you're on a PC, you're going to right click on it. And about halfway through the menu that opens up, create outlines. You'll need to outline those. Otherwise, they won't show up for me or for anybody else that goes to look at those. Yeah, I'm really happy you asked that question, Chaz. That was something I meant to mention to you guys. Cool.
I was gonna say, going alongside that, so do you recommend we use Adobe Illustrator then over Photoshop?
You can use either or, Nick. It really depends. If you're going to be doing any, like, you know, image manipulation, like finding images and modifying them, I would just do it in Photoshop. For me personally, I tend to do most of my web work in Photoshop. It's already in a pixel-based format. And for me personally, I'm just quicker in Photoshop than I am in Illustrator. So I tend to gravitate towards that just because of that. But yeah, if you plan on doing like photo-based banners at all, I mean, I would recommend Photoshop, but Illustrator is an excellent tool as well. As long as you're not really doing any image manipulation, it's absolutely fine for completing this assignment as well. I would say whatever you guys are most comfortable using, you can sort of default to that.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Yep.
Hey, Peter, it's Jennifer.
Yeah.
Can I talk to you after class real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll stick around.
Thanks.
Mhm. Cool. All right, guys. Well, if there are no other questions, we will wrap up now. I know it's a few minutes early, but that's okay. That again just gives me a quicker opportunity to get the recording wrapped up and then put into YouTube. So, as always, if you guys have any questions over the course of the next week, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And yeah, I will see you guys all back here next week.
Sorry, one final question.
Okay,
We don't
yeah.
have to worry about the CSS box model, right?
No, yeah, please don't worry about the CSS box model. In fact, I thought I turned the visibility of that off. Are you guys actually seeing that in your in the
Yes.
week 3? Okay. I will see what I need to do to remove that. Yeah, that's weird. I swear I turned the visibility of that thing off. But yeah, no worries. Yes, do not complete that. I will assign that to you guys next week and give you a nice screen recording that I'm going to make on how to complete that. Okay, so it'll very much walk you through the process of it.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, I will move that out of there just so it doesn't confuse you guys.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem. All right. Cool. All right, guys. Well, that will do it. Jennifer, stick around. We can we'll talk. I'll stop the screen recording as well. Yeah, again, have a good one, guys.
All right, see you next week.
Yep. Have a good day.
Have a good day.
Cool. Jennifer, hang on one second. I'm just going to remove folks from here that are still hanging out, and we'll let's see. No, I don't want to do it.
Okay, so did you get my email? Because I was kind of having an anxiety attack earlier.
Yeah.
I didn't upload my picture of the academy. I was going to do that today when I uploaded, the proposal.
Yeah.
I realized when I went to go put it in that everyone else had a different picture than me, and I only had the bears. I only went to the bears. I thought I was done after 16 lessons.
You should have been. I'll take a look at those and see if there's an issue. If there is, I'll let you know.
Right?
Yeah, no.
I had something different than everyone else.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I had the bears image and then the bears video we put in. It was the last thing.
Yes.
But everyone else had like a picture of a lady.
Okay. When I went through and looked last week, the bear image and then the video were the last things that I saw. But I'll look through everybody's and kind
I
of.
thought that. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought that I didn't do the whole lesson, that I stopped at one point and didn't do it right.
Okay.
Was
I'll let you know. From what you're telling me, your experience is the same experience I had, because we had to basically copy and paste that the link with like the bear.
Okay, well then I have to. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Then I have to put it in there because I didn't put it in there because I didn't think it was done.
Okay.
So I'll put it in right now. I thought that it was incomplete and then I was gonna do it after this class right now. I thought that, and I was so excited. I'm like, ooh, I'm done. I did a good job and all this stuff. And then
I know it sounds like you finished, Jennifer. So I mean, I get it. I'm glad that you brought it up, but I think you're okay. If for some reason I see some crazy mistake or something, I'll let you know. But yeah, just do a screen chat with like the bear in the video and
Yes, yes, I've got two of them. Yes,
Okay,
okay, well, okay. All right, I don't know how I screwed that up, but I will put
No,
that in.
I don't think you screwed anything up. I think you're okay. So,
Okay. All right, I'm gonna put it in when I find, here it is.
Cool.
Okay, all right, well, have a great night. I'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
All right, bye.
Bye.
You gotta hang it up. There we go.